Hey everyone, welcome to the show. I'm James, that's Katie, and of course, that makes this episode 14 of Circles and Squares. Kate, listen, before we start talking about any game-related stuff, I just have to say, the Dallas Stars, they lost.
They
did. It was tough.
What tragedy has struck everyone?
I had to let everyone know just before the show started, we have to acknowledge this, right? Like, Dallas Stars, if you're listening, if any of your players are listening, Canada supports you, okay? On my behalf, as the biggest Canadian Stars fan in existence.
Yes. It's not a big competition, but yes.
Listen, it was a crazy thing to watch. I was so emotional. I cried when they got kicked out. I'll be honest with you. I don't have any shame admitting that.
Aww.
But it was, man, like, it's been like 20 years since they've been in the finals, and it was like a dream to watch. And as sad as it is for me now, I feel like looking back on it, it's like going to be one of the fondest memories of like all time for me watching this.
That's like the funny thing about second place, right? Is like you come like fourth place in a big competition. It's like, wow, fourth place is amazing. We did so well. But you come second, you're so close to being first. And it's like, oh, how didn't we win?
Right.
Like, it's devastating. But in reality, second place is phenomenal.
Yeah, well, that's what I gotta tell myself. But right now, the wound is like, it feels like someone just like punched me in the ribs several hundred times and left me on the side of the road. But I'm not as bad as they feel probably, but yeah, anyway, good effort. There's always next season. Wish them luck. But why don't we talk about some video games instead? Cheer ourselves up a little bit.
Exactly.
Well, cheer me up. I'm sure you're feeling fine.
The best distraction you could have, really.
It is. So as per normal, we're going to be talking about the games we've been playing for the first part of the show, and then we will take a break, get into some news stories. We got some really big news stories. I didn't realize, like, I was putting the show together and we're like, oh, there's not a whole lot of news that's happened. And then you're kind of like, yeah, but, Bethesda got bought by Microsoft.
You're like, yeah, this is
that's pretty big. And it's not really PlayStation news, but it does affect them in some ways. So we'll talk about that and a few other small things as well. And then, of course, for the third segment, we are going back to a good old quiz to end the show off. Of course, we'll do a listener mail as well at the end of the show before we leave for the day. But let's get into the games we're playing, Kate. And I would like to first, we're going to talk about Among Us. But before we do, I've got a couple little notes about two other games. I finished Persona 4 Golden, and that's one of the first games I talked about on the show. I think it was like episode 2 or 3.
I think so, yeah, because I was playing 5 and you were playing 4 Golden.
Yeah, right. So yeah, I finished the game off. Wow, what a game. Okay, so I won't get into like the mechanics and stuff because I spoke about it last time, but I just wanted to kind of wrap up my feelings on the story and whatnot. And I really feel like I can understand where people are coming from when they say like it's their favorite Persona game. The story and the characters, like I personally feel like it's on par with 5 in terms of like the resolution and the story arcs and the characters and everything. It just depends which ones you liked more and maybe which ones you identified with.
It's going to come down to personal preference. And also I think some people, too, you have a stronger connection to whichever one you played first.
Well, yeah.
I think some people have that as well.
For me, that's for sure 5. But I really liked the story in 4 as well. Like, the characters were great. And I feel like in a vacuum where I would have played them both simultaneously or at the same time, 4 might have even had some of my more favorite characters overall. Okay. So I think that's actually like a huge reason I enjoyed the game so much. And I also would say that there is a big twist. For those that have played a Persona, they always have like a big character twist, like it happened in 5. The thing about this one though is I saw the twist coming a lot earlier. Like there's like I don't want to spoil anything, or maybe it's an older game, but I won't spoil it for you.
Yeah, don't spoil it for me. I'm gonna play it.
There's always like quite a shift where a character changes motivations or something, and I saw this one coming a lot earlier, so that kind of let me down a little bit because I was hoping I was wrong about that, but I wasn't.
Right. Now, did you also guess 5? Like, I
didn't guess 5. Okay. No, in 5 that really shook me like hard when that happened. Like I was pretty surprised. So with this one, I was hoping for a similar thing, but
okay. So you aren't just like Sherlock Holmes with these games. No, it was a different thing for 4.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, like I mean, the combat system, like I said in the previous episode, is just not quite as good, and it doesn't have like the guns, and it's missing the nuclear element that they introduced in 5 as like an extra complexity to the system. So just a bit more simple there, and whatever. But overall, like great game. I really enjoyed having it on Vita. Like I would love to play future Persona games on Vita. I plan on getting Persona 3. There's a mobile version of that, so I'll play that eventually. But Persona 4 Golden, hell, what a game. Like if you have it on it's on PC now too, so like,
yeah, it just recently came out on Steam, so
yeah, pick it up if you need to. But that's my thoughts on that. Great game. So the other thing I've been playing, which is the next continuation of my Ratchet and Clank saga, is Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus. So last time I had played Tools of Destruction, which was the first ever PS3 Ratchet and Clank. So this one is the sequel to that.
Okay.
And it's like the really short one. It's only 5 hours long, or it took me like 5.5 hours. So a really like bite-sized, shrunken down version. But this game was so much better than Tools of Destruction
right.
was.
Okay, and I remember you talking about Tools of Destruction on a previous episode recently.
Last
you were
time.
like, you had some kind of reservations about it, and
Yeah,
even though you enjoyed it.
Didn't have like the best weapons. Like they usually have a lot of similar weapons, but they cycle a few out and whatever. But like the graphics are such a step up. You can really see like how the developers were getting used to the new PS3 hardware and like working on how to make everything look good.
Right, they were figuring out, seeing like how far they could push boundaries and things.
Yeah, and this is really improved. The only thing that looks really weird in this game is they made Ratchet look furry in a way, but it just the quality of the graphics just weren't there to make it look good, and he ended up his whole like furry part of his face and his ears and stuff just looks like really, really blurred and strange and really off-putting. And I thought for a second, like, is my game glitching? But no, that's just the way his fur looks.
Right, so he's having a bad hair day for the whole game.
He is. But aside from that, like, it's a really good game. They scrapped all that bullshit motion control stuff, so you don't no longer are like flying through the air and having to angle your controller around. Like, no, none of that bullshit. It's much better in that way. I really enjoyed, I think last time too, like, I didn't like the way they used Clank with those the little puzzles standing on little buttons and whatever. Right, it just wasn't very fun. And in this game, they have a really cool little Clank mini game where he goes into a different dimension where you can kind of distort the gravity. So your left stick, you're moving Clank around, and your right stick, you distort the gravity so you can push up, and then all of a sudden everything moves. Like Clank's walking on the roof and everything moves up. Or you can do left and right and he's walking on one of the walls. And there's some really cool puzzles, kind of like this is going to be a really obscure reference for those of you playing at home, but Wario Land 4.
Okay.
Back on the Game Boy Advance, stick with me.
All right.
The idea of that game is you would run through the level, touch I think it was a frog or like some kind of insect
statues
at the end, and then you'd have to make your way back through the level in reverse to get to the entrance again to end the level on a time limit.
Yes.
And that's exactly the layout of the Clank sections in this game. So where you're going through like gravity kind of puzzles, shifting the gravity, getting past obstacles, and then there's a creature at the end, and then he chases you back through the start, and they're actually really fun. Like, I really enjoyed doing those.
That's awesome. That sounds like such a niche, like, weird reference, but like I'm 100% on board. I remember that game, and like that's cool.
So Wario Land 4 fans, play Ratchet and Clank Into the Nexus. Okay,
that's right. You've been waiting this whole time, and it's finally your day again.
Yeah, but I mean, getting rid of the motion controls, just tightening up the graphics. The weapons, I think, are a lot better in this. They've got the Zircon family, which is like my favorite Ratchet and Clank weapons. I don't know if you know them, but they're like these little robots you can get that hover around behind you, and they have these personalities. Like Mr. Zircon comes out, and he's like, Mr. Zircon feeds on pain, or just like says funny stuff like that. And then as you level up that weapon, all of a sudden he's got like Zircon Jr. with him, and he's like, Mr. Zircon Jr. will kill you. Like, he just has these funny things to say. And then you level it up again, and there's Mrs. Zircon shows up, and she's like this big bulky brute, and the three of them are like following you around, having this hilarious dialogue. And I like really enjoyed having them out. I would use them even if I wasn't in a combat section, just to or you won't be fighting a guy, and you'll be breaking some boxes, and he'll be like, Mr. Zircon doesn't want to waste time with crates. Like, it's awesome.
That sounds amazing.
I love it. But yeah, and this game too, the last thing I'll say about it, just because it's just a quick little thing, is like, it's very story focused compared to other Ratchet and Clanks. I don't know if it's because it's shorter or what, but they have like the villains, they actually try to flesh them out a bit more rather than being a gag. Not that it's like a story heavy game, because it's like Ratchet and Clank, but I mean, they did try to go for more of a story here. It was kind of a cool take, because the rest of them I just like zone out during the cutscenes and whatever for the most part.
That's not what you're there for.
But and I mean, the weapons are a lot cooler. The leveling them up is just the raritanium, same kind of thing, but it's a bit more customization, and you can also try the weapons out before you buy them in this game. So that's kind of nice. And they've got a new game plus mode, because it is so short, so you can go back through, and there's a few challenges and whatnot that you can't really complete during your playthrough. So they give you a little bit more to do at the end of the game.
Okay, well, that's cool. It's always cool to see like how games kind of progress over time, and like what kind of things they realize worked and what didn't work, and how they improve and kind of innovate. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's super cool. It must have been good to play them right back to back as well, so you're super fresh going into the next one.
Well, yeah, exactly, right. And I don't think I'm gonna play any more before into the Nexus, or not into the Nexus. What's the Rift Apart? That's
Rift
the new
Apart,
one. Before that one comes out, I don't think I'm gonna play anymore. There's still a couple I haven't tried. I was looking at the list, but I've played most of the mainline ones at least, so I'm good for now. But I'll complete the series one day.
That's good, yeah. Don't fatigue yourself.
Anyway, Kate, why don't we get into a bit of talk about Among Us? Because this is a game we both played a little bit of, me a bit more than you.
I think so.
So if you've been living under a rock and you've not heard of Among Us at this point, I have a stat before we start. This game had... I think I saw online, I don't know if it's a verified number or something, but there were some points a couple years ago, because this game is from 2018.
Yes,
and
this is the most shocking thing you'll hear all week. This game is already a couple years old.
Yeah, so...
It is not new.
Before we talk about the game itself, I saw a stat online where at one point during 2018, I think it had like a concurrent user base of something like 7.5 users per day. Like it
right.
was...
So that's one group of friends playing
Yeah,
it.
like one or like maybe two groups a day or something like that, right? And I looked up some stats before coming to record today, and it had last weekend the game had over 3 million concurrent users.
Wow.
On the game. So it's just like crazy how this is blown up and like Twitch and everything. But for those who don't know, it's basically I guess you can speak to the board game Werewolves, as you know.
Yeah, it's a social deduction game basically, which is a lot of very popular board game genre, and there's a bunch of good ones like Werewolf and
Coup.
like Coup, Deception. My personal favorite, Secret Hitler, which I recommend you go look up.
Yeah, I like Salem a lot. Is a really fun one. Basically, what it is you're sitting in a group, and a lot of these they're board games or card games, like social talking games, where basically you're sitting in a group, say 6, 7, 8 people, whatever you have, and you're all assigned a role. So within their group, 1 or 2 people will be like a witch or a werewolf or the murderer or whatever it is.
Yeah, you'll be basically like the villain of the game.
Yeah. And you're just trying to basically kill the other players while they're trying to complete some kind of objective and figure out who the villain is. And you do a lot of it through talking, and you're like, well, I think this person's the killer. Wait, no, I couldn't be. I was involved in this last situation, and it turned out good. So I'm definitely good.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a lot of deception.
The games themselves usually have pretty light mechanics in them, because the big hook of them is that there are 1 or 2 people who are like deceiving you, and then you have to figure out that they're the villains, and then when you're the bad guy, you're tricking all your friends and like trying to throw someone else under the bus. And it's basically that core concept of like who's gonna like cat and mouse, like who's gonna find who out before like the kind of arbitrary mechanics come in and like end the game.
Right. And so this is one of those, except the twist on this one is it's a video game. So instead of being completely based on minimal mechanics and mostly just verbal discussion, in this game it's a 2D top-down kind of game. It's pretty basic graphic-wise. It looks like a Flash game, but you're all on a spaceship or a map. There's a few different maps. We'll just stick to the spaceship for the explanation. And you're the crew on the ship, and you're trying to all complete tasks around the ship, and you're actually controlling your character, moving around, completing these little mini games. And one person among us, is the killer.
Hey, that's the name of the game.
Yeah, wow. And that person's the killer, and they're going around trying to murder people while you're trying to complete the tasks. So basically, you have the crewmates who have like a completion bar at the top. Once they complete all of their objectives, the ship is fixed and you win. Or you can also, if you deduce who the killer is, you win before the killer murders everybody, and you find the corpse, and then you have a discussion. But the cool part I like about this game is that you play it in silence, and you're just walking around doing your thing, and it can last for like a few minutes before someone gets murdered. And then, because you're playing over Discord or whatever, the murder happens, then everyone has like a very short section of time in which to discuss what happened, and it becomes quite hectic, I found. I don't know if you had...
Yeah, that's actually the part of the game that interests me the most, because obviously when you're sitting down with your friends around like the same table and you're playing the board game, you're talking the entire time. And it isn't like, hopefully it is an intense argument the entire time, and like there's downtime between rounds and turns and things. But in this game, it is silence. And that's really interesting, because once you do get to those moments in the game where you're in the discussion period where you have time to talk about whatever murder has just taken place, you only have such a brief window of time to kind of like put your thoughts out there and like listen to what other people have to say. And the other thing that's really neat about it too, being a video game, is that you don't see what everyone else is doing. So there's times where like a murder will happen on one side of the map and you were on the totally opposite side of the map and you saw absolutely nothing. So like you might not always have something to contribute, but you're listening to other people's accounts and then it's like, oh, do I trust them? Does that make sense? Like,
right. And yeah, like you said, because sitting around a table, you would be able to see if like, oh, if it's a card-based game like Salem, you see this person's got a big handful of cards or like what they've played down. Whereas in this, you could lie to people. You could say, oh, I was in the engine room, but really you weren't, or whatever you feel like you're doing. To me, the thing I like most about this game is that I find that during the board game versions of this, that it's very easy for a few people who are experienced or know what they're doing to kind of dominate the conversation and kind of make their deductions like the way the game plays out, where some of the quieter players might be a little bit less inclined to talk or like unsure of what they're doing, stuff like that. And of course that can still happen in Among Us, but the thing that balances that out in my opinion is that it's not only verbal, you're also completing your task. Like even if you don't have a lot to say during the talking portion, you still have like gameplay mechanics you're trying to complete. And you can, if you're a good killer, like you don't have to be good at lying about it. If you're, I mean, you do. Let me take it back. If you, obviously you need to like make up a lie about like your innocence if you kill someone in Among Us.
Right.
But people might not even suspect you if you're skilled enough mechanically at the game to pull it off.
Right,
well.
exactly. Like if you kill and you make sure nobody sees it, you're not necessarily like a target. Whereas in some of the board game versions, it's like, well, these people were the two that played the cards, so we know that one of the two of them has to be the bad guy, and they're like, you know, blaming each other. Whereas in this game, it's like, yeah, if you're, you know, being really sneaky and nobody sees you commit the murder, then it's not always as easy to jump to that, like, okay, it has to be either this or this. It's like, well, we have no idea. We just kind of came across a body and like, who knows how long ago they were murdered. Yeah,
definitely. And just because of that and the way that it blends those game mechanics with the talking portions of like what these social games are. I just love this game. I could play it all the time. Like we had a group that got together. I played it a couple times now with a couple different groups. And just the dynamics that kind of form about like this person's sketchy because they don't talk a lot, but wait a second, they never talk a lot. Like, or I was just doing my task. This person finishes their task very quick. So like my one friend, he would complete his tasks very quick. You have like 6 or 7 things you need to do. And then he would be done. So he would just follow people around to watch what they're doing. And people were like, well, that's kind of suspicious. And he's like, no, I just finished my stuff. Like, I'm just following you around. Like, it's kind of cool the way that the self-narrative, like the emergent stories that come out of just like your group.
Absolutely. That's kind of like the blessing and a curse about these kind of games is like you sort of develop like kind of like a meta strategy for these games, especially when you play with the same kind of group. And in one way, it's really interesting to see how that game kind of evolves and how like your group puts your spin on the game. But then at the same time, like sometimes, especially in a game that doesn't have a lot for you to go off of, people kind of latch on to that a lot. And they're like, oh, well, this person normally talks more and they're not talking much, so they must be the bad guy. But it's like,
yeah, it's like flawed logic.
Yeah, that's not really an argument that has anything to do with the confines of the game itself. Like, that's just you, like, deducing them as a person. And maybe you're right, but also, like, you know, maybe they got a headache.
Yeah, or maybe they're outplaying you. Maybe they know you're going to think that, so they act differently.
Exactly. Yeah. So, like, it's kind of, like, a strength of these games, but also can kind of be a weakness. And I've seen it devolve a few times into like, you always just think I'm bad because like of, you know, whatever reason.
Yeah.
And
well, that's kind of what happened to me. Just like a little story is I was playing when we were playing that other night. The first time I was the murderer. So the way it works is when you find the dead body, you report it, and then it's like an emergency meeting. But the killer can kill someone and then report the body and be like, "Oh, I just found this body."
You did
like,
that to me.
So I think I murdered you.
You did it to me.
And my first time as a killer, I actually killed the first 2 people that I killed. I self-reported it, and I was like, "Guys, I just found this body. Like I was just walking by, and then I reported the next one. Guys, you'll never guess what I found the next one. I don't think I won the game, but after that." I ended up being the killer again afterwards. And I murdered someone and I was like, good, I'm just going to leave him this time. I'm not going to report it. Mm-hmm. And then it was taking so long for people to find, like I don't know if they just didn't go in that room or like what was going on, but like it took like, I want to say like 3 or 4 minutes and no one had found the body. So I was like, well, fuck this. I'm just going to go report it because it's been so long.
Right.
And then, the way it happened is walked past the body because I forgot where it was.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, okay, now, like, I don't know if someone saw me walk past this room, but I can't walk past this body again and not report it, because that's really
that's
suspicious.
Very suspicious.
You have to, like, because anyone would report it, right? So,
Yeah.
and I kind of, like, was forced into it, but I developed a reputation as someone that, like, always self-reports.
Always reports.
So now, then in other games, when I was legitimately a good member of the good side, I would find a body and report it, and everyone was like, "Oh, James, like, are you the killer again?" I'm like, "No, man, I'm just like here reporting this murder." Like, it's totally like one of those meta narratives, like with that group of people that, like, I'm forever gonna have that detriment now.
Yes.
So it's just one of those things, but. Yeah, I don't know if you tried playing online at all. Like, I know I tried to sneak into a couple matches just, with randoms online, and the game really suffers if you don't have, in my opinion, like that online, or at least like a voice chat kind of thing.
Because there is an actual like chat within the game that you can use, I guess. But I think like, yeah, definitely it's kind of made with the idea that you're on voice communication with each other.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing I like about it too is a lot of those other games, when you die, you just have to sit there and watch what happens. Like, oh, I hope they find out who it is. But in Among Us, you have that list of like repairs you need to do around the ship, and even if you get murdered like 30 seconds into the game, you still are alive, like, as a ghost, and you can go complete your little missions to help out the good team. So you still have something that kind of keeps you engaged. It's not like it's super fun to go do any of those tasks really, but at least it gives you something to do rather than like,
Yeah, and I think it's smart just to even keep people engaged, as opposed to like, okay, you're dead, you're gonna go like get up, and especially like when you're playing online with people and you're not physically there, like, you died and like, okay, I'm gonna go get up and like go make some tea or like do whatever, and then like you come back and the game's over and people are it's just keeps it a little more organized, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on it, other than like, man, I'm gonna keep playing this for a little bit as long as I have friends that are interested. So yeah, I don't know. What else have you been playing, Kate?
Well, I'm going to keep the trend of online games. I've been playing a lot of those recently. I guess it's just perfect in today's climate. And then also, I guess maybe just a little coincidental that some really nice ones have come out recently. But I'm super excited because I'm going to talk about a board game on this show. And,
well, kind of.
Well, kind of. I'm cheating to talk about a board game because my favorite board game of all time has a Steam release that I've been playing a lot of. So technically, it is a video game now. And this, of course, is Gloomhaven. So if you've never heard of Gloomhaven, Gloomhaven is the final boss of board games. It is immense. It's a cooperative and campaign-driven game with like some legacy formats. So it is big. It is a commitment. You get this like massive box that the game comes in. Like, for reference, I drove with this one time and put it in the passenger seat. And like the car started beeping like, you have a passenger who's not wearing a seatbelt because the game was so heavy. So it's fantastic. But yeah, you like, has legacy formats, so you progress your characters through the story and they level up, and you're opening new envelopes all the time that contain new characters and elements, and like gameplay mechanics.
It really is like a big RPG,
yeah,
but in board game format. Like, it's the only way to really describe it.
Exactly. It's basically like, yeah, exactly. It's an RPG. I think the tagline for it is it's like D&D in a box, but it's a lot more like streamlined than something like a traditional tabletop like pen and paper game. Because at its core, it's kind of like a turn-based dungeon crawler. So you'll enter most scenarios that you have a goal, such as survive a certain amount of turns, or make it to a certain area of the map, or kill all the enemies. Every player has cards that they play to complete these goals.
Right, because it's also a little bit of a deck building game.
Yeah, it's also kind of a deck building game. So it sounds really complicated, but it's really elegant with how all the different pieces come together and how actually fluid the game works. So each person at your table is going to have a character class, and they come with a deck of cards. And then you choose out of those cards which ones to bring with you at any given scenario. And the core kind of gameplay is each card has a top half and a bottom half, and that'll do various things. And then you play 2 cards per turn, performing the top of one and the bottom of another. So this gives you really good customizability. Yeah, that's a tough word.
No, but it's true, because you build your deck and say you have like 10 cards, but really you have 20 options, because you have an upper and lower ability.
Yeah, exactly. So like these are really big combinations of different things you can do on each turn, even before you factor in things like, you know, your environment or what the enemies are doing, what your allies are doing. So it ends up being like kind of a simple game, but with a lot of complexity with all the moving pieces. So it is overwhelming kind of to pick up, but once you get into the swing of things and figure out how it works, it's actually like a really fluid game. Everything's designed so that it fits perfectly.
Yeah, I actually find it's not that confusing. Like we played a little bit of the board game version together, and I found it's actually quite approachable. Like to me, I don't play a ton of board games, but like comparing it to D&D, which I've dabbled like very minorly in, D&D is so intimidating because it requires so much creativity on the half of the player.
Yes.
Like there's not a set amount of moves you can do, whereas in Gloomhaven you have like finite abilities your character has, and it's up to you just to select them. And I find that like way more approachable. Yeah,
exactly. It's basically the perfect balance of like there's infinite depth to the game, but it's also like relatively easy to play. So like maybe there's a little bit of a learning curve when you first pick it up just because there are a lot of rules and a lot of moving pieces. But like after you've played a match or two, it's really easy just like pick it up and play. So that's the board game. So the Steam game was released in 2019, I think in July, and it's still in early access. But a month ago, they added co-op to it.
You couldn't play co-op before? Why would you want to play this by yourself? Before.
So you'd play alone, and it's up to 4 players. So you'd play alone, and you'd just play multiple characters. So yeah, I mean, it's not... I probably wouldn't play it alone. But when the co-op came out, my core group, who like we play the board game of pretty consistently, we all picked it up. And we're having a blast with it. So broadly speaking, the game works really well on Steam. It's pretty bare right now. Like it's just missing a lot of things that eventually are going to add. Like right now, there's only 6 classes available that you can play, whereas in the base game, there are 17. And then there's obviously things like, you know, extra things like enemies aren't all in the game yet and some items and things, but they're updating it pretty consistently. And for an alpha, I think for early access at least, I think it's in a really good spot. So the biggest difference between playing online is how much more automated it is.
That must be a good thing, actually, because there is a bit of calculation and like setup involved in the game.
Yes. So it's really interesting because when you're playing Gloomhaven, there's a lot of management that needs to get done. So first, it has a really long setup. You actually like create the maps that you play in by having a bunch of like map tiles that kind of fit together like a puzzle. And then you have to like set up all the enemy figurines and like place a bunch of like traps down on the board and like the treasure tiles, and like everything has like a tactical element to it, which is really nice to play as a board game. It's like, makes it a little more immersive and like, you're visually seeing everything. But, it takes a lot of time to do that. And then additionally, all the enemies need to be like controlled by the players. So they all have their own decks of cards that they, draw at random each turn to determine what they're doing. But like you as a player have to draw those cards for them. And then you need to calculate based off of the rules of the game, like if they have an attack, which person they're targeting,
right,
and like where they're gonna move on the board.
Yeah, right. At which you may need to refer to the rule book too in certain times as like a tiebreaker.
Yeah.
Because if they're supposed to attack the closest good guy character, like player character, all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, would they attack? I'm closer, but I'm through a wall. Like,
Yeah, exactly. So like the game is set up really well in that they have like rules and like orders that you follow, so it clears up any of those like
ambiguities.
Thank you. But it definitely takes a lot of like, getting used to the game and getting a little bit more proficient with it. And then also like there is that time where, you do kind of have to like, well, would they do this? And like you're sort of mathing and figuring it out. Whereas Steam just does that all for you. It just tells you this is what they're doing, and like it's just right there on the screen. So this is kind of a blessing and a curse, which is the Gloomhaven joke.
All right, I'll believe you.
Where on one hand, it speeds the game up a lot, but on the other hand, at least for my group, which has a really like high level investment in the game, which is a really polite way of saying we're big nerds. But like,
we do a PlayStation podcast, Kate.
But like we have fun managing the monster turns. That's part of what we like about the game, is like we like sitting and being like, oh, well, that person's gonna like move here, so if we know that he's gonna move there, then I'm gonna do this this on my turn, or like it's kind of like part of the strategy for us.
But you could still plan that out.
Yeah, exactly.
On the computer too, right?
Exactly. Like you still can strategize in the same way, and it's still the core game is the same, but it's just, I don't know, it kind of just incites an interesting conversation where it's like, oh, do you think the enemy would do this? And then sometimes we have to talk it out a little bit to like really figure out what's going to happen. So we like that, but I think at the same time, like it is kind of nice that we can play a scenario in half an hour now instead of like an hour plus.
Right. So you could potentially play like twice as many scenarios in one play session as you would
exactly. On the board. So that's kind of a benefit for a lot of people probably. The two biggest benefits for me personally is that the Steam game actually comes with its own new campaign and scenarios. So it's kind of like an extra big content drop as well.
That's awesome.
As just being convenient. And then it's great for if we're not physically together. We can all hop on and be like, we've got an hour this evening. We can play a scenario together. But yeah, the presentation has tons of potential. There's definitely some things it has to iron out being early access, but the environments are really neat. The animations for each move are really great, particularly some of like the buff and debuff things you can do. So for example, there's a bard class that can like debuff enemies, and they have a move that's literally called like throw your voice, and it targets some enemies, but like the animation in the game, like it literally does this like banshee scream when you use it, and it's like ah, and like every time it makes me laugh because it's just such a stupid and ridiculous thing that they put in.
Is it animated in the way like a online like trading card game would animate, like the attacks between those, or how does it look?
No, so it actually is like, it looks like a board, and it's like kind of like a little environment. It's like hex based. So your character is like an actual like 3D model, and they move around the board. Kind
of like a 3D chessboard then.
Yeah,
in a way,
it's
but
kind
just
of
Gloomhaven.
It's kind of like that, and yeah, all the characters have their own little model that move around, and when they do an attack, they actually swing their weapon or whatever. So it's not the highest quality graphics, but they're done really well, and it's really cool just to see like the characters kind of come to life in a way that we've never seen before. And my personal favorite detail is like, so every enemy has a normal and an elite form, which is basically just like the elite is a stronger version of the same enemy. But instead of having the same model, they've given them like cooler armor or something if they're the elite. So like they look really neat and like different from like just the regular enemies you get on the board game. Whereas like, okay, it's the same enemy, but now he's elite. He's got like a cool cape or like a hat on or something. And it's just like, there's a lot of little like details that are, you could see there's just a lot of love put into it.
Yeah, right. Because in the board game, when you have an elite enemy, the difference is that his little standee thing is a different color.
Yeah, exactly.
that's all it is.
Yeah, that's all it is. So it's kind of nice that they just like some extra touches that they didn't need to do, but they did, which makes me really excited for like what the game's going to look like when it's actually finished. Mm-hmm. But I will say before I talk too much about Gloomhaven, it does have some issues to be aware of. The UI is quite clunky. At this point, sometimes it's not super clear where all the information you need is. And a big issue that we have is that you can't look at your cards when it's not your turn. So that means like it's kind of tough to think about what you're going to do next turn ahead of time. So at the beginning of each round, like everyone selects their cards they're going to play. You play out that turn, you go to the next turn, and so on and so forth until you're done. But normally when like you've done your turn in a board game, you're looking at your cards and your resources, and you're deciding what you're going to do while everyone else is playing, and then like you move on to the next round quite quickly. But because you can't look at your cards, you just sort of like are kind of waiting. And there's also been times where like we've accidentally done something weird because we've clicked something by mistake, and like it does a lot of like confirming that you want to do something. So sometimes to do one simple thing, you're like clicking on 5 different places.
Are you sure you'd like to do this?
Exactly. But then sometimes it doesn't confirm, and you end up like, oh, I could have attacked 2 people, but I only attacked 1 because I accidentally like didn't click in the right order. And so it's a little bit janky with stuff like that. And then we've also had some like technical issues where like people are just disconnected randomly, and some things just like straight up not working properly. So but like it's kind of almost made it fun because like funny things happen. So one of the best ones was we had one of our players, his character's core mechanic is that he uses elements to augment their abilities. So he has one card that allows him to like use an element to gain extra damage on an attack. And on his turn, he consumed the element, which gave him the exact amount of damage to kill an enemy. But for the rest of us, it didn't show that he used that step. So for everyone else but him, he did 1 damage too short and the enemy was still alive.
But his game killed the enemy?
But his game killed the
that's
enemy.
Crazy.
So for us, then it was the enemy's turn next and the enemy hit him back. And
how could it have 2 separate instances?
It was so weird. And whenever you take damage in that game, you have to confirm if you're taking the damage, because there's sometimes where like maybe you'll use an item to negate some of it, or like
there's mechanics
whatever.
You can deflect it.
There's mechanics to to deal with damage differently. So you have to confirm I take that damage, which they say like I will receive the damage, which I know is kind of a weird way to say it. Like, all right, I received that. But so we're all sitting there waiting for him to like accept his damage. And he's sitting there on his screen. It's showing him that it's like the next person's turn, having skipped over the enemy. So he's sitting there thinking like this person's just like sticking around. And after like a minute or so, we're like, so Zane, you gonna take that damage? He's like, what are you talking about? And then we're like screen sharing with each other and like, we're like, oh my God, like that's so weird. So he ended up having to like disconnect and then come back in later. And like, luckily he wasn't the host of the game. So we just like kicked him out and we're like, well, it's not working for you, awesome. But the rest of us are fine. And then he came back in and we kept playing, but it was just such a weird, like, that's inconsistency.
Bizarre, wow.
So
gotta love early access sometimes.
Yeah. So stuff like that is kind of fun when it's a little bit janky and, you're kind of joking around and laughing, but definitely those are definitely some things they could iron out before the game kind of goes a little bit more broadly public, but
sounds cool, though.
It's super good. So I think it's nice if you've ever kind of been interested in those sort of games, but your friend group is having trouble getting together, and especially with the climate right now, I think it's a great way to kind of like pick up and sort of like dip your feet in.
Yeah, well, between that and Among Us, you're set.
Yeah, you're exactly. Good. You don't ever have to leave your house.
All right, well, I think that's going to do us for the games we've been playing this week, but have no fear, folks. We will be right back to talk about the news, so don't go anywhere. All right, guys, welcome back to the second part of the show, and that means we are going to be talking about the news. And as we do every time, for the first episode of the month, we talk about the PS Plus games for that month. So we both always pick one of the selections, play it for next time, and let you guys know what we think. So the PS Plus games, as announced yesterday, or today. Was it today?
I think it was today. Yeah.
Okay. Well, the PS Plus games for October 2020 are Vampire with a Y and Need for Speed. Which Need for Speed is it again? I don't have the top of my head here. It is Need for Speed.
The fast
Payback.
one.
Payback.
Payback. Got
it. So, you know what? This is a decent offering, Kate. What are you feeling?
It was a pretty easy choice for me. I'm not a racing game person, so Vampire is definitely my pick.
Yeah. You know what? That's one of those games that I feel has a really underground following in terms of like, it's like a big PC thing, and I've never really heard too much, and except for the last couple of years.
That's part of why I want to play Vampire. Is like it's one of those games that like pops up all the time on like really high on lists of like great games to play or like things to keep your eye on. But like I've never met a single person who's actually played Vampire game, and like I kind of want to play it just to like confirm this is in fact a real game and like it is possible to play. So
there you go. Well, you take that. I was actually gonna go for Need for Speed anyway. Okay. A couple of reasons is, number one, Vampire, I'd actually think that's probably what I would pick if I had like all the time in the world, but it also seems like a lot more intensive.
It is kind of like a big RPG, so I don't know how far I'll get into it just because I've got some other big ticket games I'm playing. But
the other thing for me is I recently downloaded just the Burnout Paradise remaster just to mess around. I love Burnout. I just haven't had like a game like that to play for so long. Mm-hmm. Somehow Need for Speed is just like really scratching an itch for me right now.
Okay, well,
like
perfect.
That selection.
It
so
couldn't
I'll go
come
with
at
that.
a better time.
It's perfect. So we'll let you know what we think of those next episode. But the next news story we have today is one that kind of came right out of left field. So there's some details about the Spider-Man remaster that's coming out for PS5 that was kind of released today, and they've recast Peter Parker's facial
facial capture,
facial look. So Yuri Lowenthal, the voice actor, I guess I didn't know this, but I guess he didn't record facial capture for Spider-Man. He just did the voice, and they had a different guy do the face, which is weird because I feel like most of the time it's
usually
the same.
You do the same. I think it's also just probably more convenient to do it that way, but then it's like one person giving a performance, and I think it maybe ends up often a little more cohesive than like.
So I don't know why they did it that way
too.
In the first place, but they've recast the actor, like the face model for this new one. So it looks. I'm looking at the screenshots right now. It looks. I mean. I think both Peter Parker versions look good. It's just weird to see like a completely different take. Like this new guy, his name is, what's his name? Ben Jordan. Looks so much like they made him look a lot more like the MCU version of Spider-Man. I feel.
Yeah, like more like Tom Holland.
Yeah, with the new actor.
Which is funny. I saw an interview. Post on the internet, and it was like, we didn't intentionally try to make him look like Tom Holland. It's like, nah, but maybe you noticed.
Yeah, fuck off. Yes, you did.
Sure.
It's almost like, I feel like because Avengers got a lot of criticism, like the game Avengers got a lot of criticism for having weird off-brand kind of looks for the Avengers characters.
Yeah, the like store brand version.
Yeah, so I wonder if when those characters were originally revealed and PlayStation was remastering, Spider-Man for PS5, if they were like, maybe we should recast Peter Parker to make him look more like the MCU, so we don't take that type of flack. But it's weird because people didn't have that complaint about Spider-Man on PS4.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, there's a lot of reasons, right? It's kind of fun to speculate. It's like, well, maybe he shows up in Miles Morales, but they couldn't get the same guy, and this is like the new guy, so they like used him instead. It's an interesting theory.
Like, I saw one online. I think what they were saying was that they couldn't get it to look quite right, like the facial capture and the audio from the original to look quite right with the PS5 graphics, but it's I don't know if I buy that. Like, it's just such a weird thing to happen.
The other thing too is like, what about all the other characters they upgraded that have the same face? So
I saw one guy online was hoping that they were going to recast Doc Ock as Steve Harvey.
Harvey.
What an awesome.
That would be so
just a hilarious tweet.
See, this is the one downside of not having a modding community for console, because you can bet if it's on PC, that guy's making Steve Harvey.
Yeah, they included a few new Spider-Man suits. Like there's an amazing Spider-Man suit now. I think there's 3 new ones, but so these screenshots, like the graphics just look amazing. The reflection off of the windows of the buildings, like when Spider-Man's hanging off the side, the way the environment reflects off of the glass of the building is just unbelievably cool.
Yeah, it is gorgeous. It looks fantastic. I think that's the biggest thing that's noticeable, at least right now, for like next gen games, is just how amazing the lighting is and how natural it plays into environments. And like those, even if it's a small detail, it makes everything look so much more lifelike and realistic. It's beautiful.
Yeah, it is gorgeous, I gotta say. Can't wait to play it. I'm definitely, like I said, I'm getting Miles Morales, obviously. I don't know if I'm going to play the Spider-Man remaster because I'm not getting the disc-based PS5, so I can't put my PS4 disc of Spider-Man in. I don't think I'll rebuy it.
And you've played it recently as well, so...
But it looks great, and I'm excited for people who didn't play the PS4 version like you, hopefully to play this. But Key, you know what? Let's move along to our next story. We have 4 news stories today, by the way. So this is 3.
Speaking of replaying PS4 games.
yes. So we were speaking last time. It's the PS Plus collection. So it's like it's the group of PlayStation games they're giving away for free on PS5 as part of PS Plus. Just to, I think, if nothing else, just build out like the launch lineup.
Yeah, I think that was their thing. They're like, we want to bolster your library of games to enjoy on PS5. Here's a bunch of free goodies like, please don't buy Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah, exactly, right? Well, the thing is I'm a little disappointed. I have the list of official games that's coming out here right now, and I'm a little bit disappointed by the list because on that presentation, they made it seem like it was going to be all of Sony's first-party offerings kind of thing, like, all the exclusive PlayStation Studios games. But the listing contains a lot more third-party kind of stuff than I was anticipating. But anyway, let me just go through the list quick. We'll see what we think. So we have Batman Arkham Knight, Battlefield 1, Bloodborne, Days Gone, Detroit Become Human, Fallout 4, Final Fantasy 15, God of War, Infamous Second Son, The Last Guardian, The Last of Us Remastered, Monster Hunter World, Mortal Kombat X, or 10, I don't know, Persona 5, Ratchet and Clank, Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, Uncharted 4, Thief's End, and Until Dawn. So it's a good list. It's a good list.
Yeah.
For sure. But I don't know. I was just hoping it was a bit more PlayStation
They kind
exclusive.
of branded it like with the implication that it was more PlayStation exclusive. But I will say, like, there's a lot of really big PlayStation games in here. And it's like a big ticket list too. Like every single one of these games is like, very worthwhile, and like they didn't pad it with a bunch of small titles that you could buy for like $10 anyway.
1, yeah, you can.
Yeah, okay, maybe I'm not gonna play that one, but like they're still like quite large like AAA games, I guess is the point I'm trying to make.
That's true. I mean, for me, like I think it was a really smart move to include a game like Monster Hunter World on here because it's so multiplayer centric that it'll give people who get a PS5 something to play online with their friends and get them in the online ecosystem and get them using the online functionality, even if they don't pay for a multiplayer game off the bat. Like I'm going to be buying Spider-Man Miles Morales. I don't anticipate that's going to have multiplayer, but look, I've got Monster Hunter if I wanted to jump online or something, So I think that's a good selection. I would have liked to see, Ghost of Tsushima on there. I'd like to get that, but maybe it's a bit too new.
I think probably it's a little new. Like, notice they got The Last of Us remastered. They don't have The Last of Us 2. Like, it makes sense. Like, Ghost of Tsushima is probably still going to be selling for quite a period of time where maybe these are kind of games like if you were going to buy them, you might have probably already done so by now. Right. I think this is great. I'm really excited because I've hit a few games on here that like I haven't played before and really want to play, or like even just some of the games like Bloodborne, for example. Like you can bet I'm going to be doing another run through of that game. And like I was even like considering doing it recently. I was just kind of scratching that itch, and I actually am playing it right now, like as a multiplayer thing. Yeah. But like it made me want to like do my New Game Plus with my own character that I kind of had built a certain way, and I'm like, I'm waiting for the PlayStation 5 now, and I'm super excited to go and like revisit this game, and if like more people are playing it because it's it's more accessible now. No, for me, I'm probably gonna check out I think I'm gonna try Days Gone. Like that's one of the ones that I missed during the its release last year, I think it was, or maybe 2 years ago. And I think I'll try Last Guardian as well, because that's another one that I would love to try, and I just never got around to it. But on the PS5, it's part of this collection. I may as well just toss it in for a few hours, even if I don't really exactly.
stick with it.
The collection, say what you will about it, but I think you'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't at least have a couple games on this list that they're excited to play now and to just own for free.
To kind of clean up the scraps they didn't try before.
Yeah.
But, Kate, why don't we talk about our last news story for the day, which is a bombshell out of nowhere. I think it was last week. It was very similar to when we released our last episode. But so Microsoft Xbox has purchased Bethesda, which is crazy. Like just to think about it, because if you think about E3 every year, it's always the first party studios, and then it's like EA has a press conference, Bethesda, Ubisoft, Square. It's the heavy hitters that have these conferences. So, and those are the companies you wouldn't expect that would be bought. And yet here we are. And so now, hypothetically,
it was something like $7 billion, like some ridiculous.
It was more than Star Wars. Did you know that? They bought it for more than Star Wars. That's crazy to me.
That's huge.
So yeah, what do you think about it?
I mean, I think that's big. Like it was really big news. What's funny to me is that Bethesda's next game that's being released is actually a PlayStation exclusive.
Right. Which one is that coming out next? I don't keep up with Bethesda too much.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about it. It's that time. It's not time loop, but it's that shooter with the
Deathloop.
Yeah, Deathloop. Yeah. That's right. With that mechanic. So it's not out yet, and they've agreed that they're still honoring that, and it is going to come out as a Sony exclusive, which is kind of an ironic thing. That's
weird, right?
That's happening. But yeah, it's really big. I think Bethesda doesn't have the largest lineup of games, but they're all like huge IPs, right? Like a new Elder Scrolls or a new Fallout is that's always a really big deal.
They do have other ones too that are
they've got the Dishonored series, which I played a bit of the first one and enjoyed it. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with it, and if any of those become exclusives, or if they're just gonna double dip and buy Game Pass and play Elder Scrolls 6, or if you buy it on your PlayStation, we're still making money off of that. So.
Yeah, right. It's interesting to see the debate on that, because either way you feel like, okay, well, they either are gonna have these beloved exclusive games, like whatever Fallout 5 comes out, I'm sure as long as it's not a complete mess like Fallout 76, yes. For sure that's going to be a huge game anticipated. And if that's exclusive, that's a huge reason to move to Xbox. Or if it's not exclusive, they're just going to give it to you for free on Xbox with Game Pass, or you can pay full price for it on PlayStation, like you said, and they've won either way.
Yeah, it's a win-win. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. I think both are good options. I don't know how much they want to kind of like exclusive compete versus like we're just printing free money. So
yeah, what's your if you had to guess?
If I had to guess, I would say that the big franchises, Elder Scrolls and Fallout specifically, will not be exclusive. I think they're just so many people are going to be buying them.
Yeah, and it would
on
also
systems.
be. Mm-hmm.
And I don't think they will. I think maybe they'll do smaller exclusives, like something like a Deathloop would come to Xbox now instead of
or like Doom, maybe like a second tier kind of franchise, Doom or Dishonored even maybe could be, that exclusive when they could also keep the bigger ones like you said.
Yeah, but I think the big ones, like, they're gonna make so much money off of like all the sales. Like if you think back, like when Skyrim came out, everyone and their mom knew what Skyrim was.
Oh, people still do.
And like, yeah, Skyrim's still being released on your smart fridge. Like, like keep an eye out for that. Skyrim's on everything. But I don't see them, like, I feel like they'd miss out more not getting all those like extra sales.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I don't know. I feel like it's one of those things, like PlayStation could really be in some trouble if they did go exclusive on Xbox though, because those are like, the kind of games where people who aren't necessarily gamers would still want to buy the new Elder Scrolls game. Like that's kind of a draw beyond the people that really hardcore follow the industry. And so that could be like a really big reason they would get Xbox,
Yeah, that's true. There's definitely an argument for either side. So I'll be interested to see what they do. I mean, I don't think they have like a clear like path that they need to follow with this, but it was definitely surprising and like it's gonna have some consequences regardless of which way they go. So
yeah, it's a big shakeup though, like imagine if this was the PlayStation way around. I feel like everyone would be like, hell yeah, like PlayStation's even better than Microsoft now with exclusives, and now like Microsoft, I still think that Sony has the better first party studios overall, but they definitely are have caught up a lot of ground by buying Bethesda. Yeah, I feel. So if they were to buy another one, like, wow. There's rumors they're buying Sega because of the blue Xbox controller. Like, get out of here. They're not gonna be buying it.
All right, fine. You guys can have the next 3D Sonic.
Take that. Yeah. Anyway, guys, I think that's been the news for today. So we will take a short break. And then I don't even know what this quiz is about, but Kate is going to test my knowledge on something. So
yeah, well, tune in and you too can be surprised. And welcome back for the final segment of the show. I had a lot of fun writing this, so let's get right into it and see how you do.
We're a big fan of quizzes on this show, and I feel like every time we pull a quiz out of the back pocket, they get more and more ridiculous and hilarious every time. So
well, this is no exception. So James, video games are all about escaping real life and living out exciting fantasies. Games allow you to perform incredible feats, although those feats are sometimes strange and confusing.
I love how you wrote a script.
Well, here are some amazing video game prompts out of context that show up on screen to prompt you with strange activities. Your job will be to guess which game each prompt comes from. So, okay. James, please, when you're ready, press X to attempt this quiz.
Jesus Christ. All right, let's do it.
Question 1. Press X to bitch slap or B to be a quitter.
Wait, what is this? What am I trying to do?
So these are prompts that have in various games have come up on screen and tell you to press this button in a real video game, tell you to press this button and then it will happen. Okay. So it's like press X to open the door.
I'm so sorry. I thought I was going to be matching with the game. No. Okay.
So it'll be like press X to open a door, which is in every game.
Okay, I got you.
But these prompts are unusual and specific to one game in particular. So in which game will you get prompted to press X to bitch slap or B to be a quitter?
What game would that be? Jesus. Well, let me see. It's a PlayStation game, obviously, yes?
Not all of these are exclusives, I will tell you.
Have I played this game?
I don't think so.
Jesus
This
Christ.
one was just, I thought was really fun.
Okay, just tell me this one. I have no idea.
This quiz might be hard. No, I'd like to attempt to guess for each one.
Okay, let me think about some games here. Hold on. You know what? I really have no idea what this would be, so I'm gonna say this is like a No More Heroes or something like that, because the game has like pretty stupid humor in there.
Okay, that's a really good guess. This is actually from Deadpool, the video game.
Oh,
which like
jeez,
totally a Deadpool thing,
yeah.
But well, we'll see. Okay, we'll keep it going.
I hope I get at least one on this quiz. This is hard.
There will be at least one. I guarantee you'll get.
Okay.
But we're not quite there yet. Question 2 is press square to kiss your wife.
Press square to kiss your wife. Is this?
This one I think you might have played.
Okay, I think I'm going to need a clue here. You got to give me at least a clue.
So I'll give you the context. This prompt shows up in the tutorial when it is teaching you a stealth mechanic.
What the fuck? What system is the game on?
It's on everything.
Okay, have I played it?
I think you might have. I'm not sure if you've if you played it. You definitely didn't like get super into it.
If you played it, you definitely didn't like it. So
if you played it, you definitely didn't make it through the tutorial.
All right, I'm gonna say it's a Grand Theft Auto game or something.
It is Shadow of Mordor.
I have played Shadow of Mordor.
Yeah, I thought you had.
Oh,
so
man.
The tutorial teaches you sneaking. You like sneak up on your wife and give her a kiss before you know.
Man, I played that in like as a launch title for PS4. Man, that's a long time ago.
It is indeed.
God, you know what? I hope everyone else is doing better than me. This is the hardest nails quiz.
Sometimes it's tough to get the difficulty, but you know what? Sometimes your best guess is better than being right. So let's try question 3. Press space to say apple.
Press space to say apple. Is this going to be some like farming kind of game or something, I guess?
Ooh,
I have no idea.
Not even close. You're going to kick yourself for this one.
Maybe I'm going too fast through it. I don't know. What is it?
This is Portal 2.
Oh.
At the very beginning when Wheatley's like taking you through all the tests. And I actually watched a YouTube of this little scene and it's hilarious. But like he wants you to speak and spaces jump. And so then you look like an idiot.
I will defend myself on this, even though I definitely wouldn't have got it anyway. But I played Portal 2 on console, so I don't have a space bar on my console.
Space.
So.
Okay, well, fair enough. That does make it a little tricky. So question 4, press Z repeatedly to encourage your snail.
Oh, that is that Killer Queen?
No.
Because you ride the queen along the bottom?
You do ride the queen along the snail. That is so smart. It's actually from Undertale. It is a little mini game where you do snail races.
Right. Okay, at least I had a reasonable guess on
yes,
that
was a really good guess. I wish I could have given it to you. So question 5, press X to offer business card.
Oh.
This is definitely a game you've played and have recommended to me many times.
Are you serious? Okay, now I'm going to look like a complete fool if I get this wrong. Hold on. Okay, I'm determined to get this one. I need a hint, though.
Okay. I would say that this would be a very Japanese setting.
Oh, God. Give me one more hint.
It's probably in kind of a wacky, goofy humor. But also quite serious.
So cryptic. Oh my God. I know what this is. I know. It's Judgment.
It is Yakuza. Yes, you got one.
Thank God. Okay. Now I don't look like a complete embarrassment.
Right. We're on our road, so you've done well. Now we're going to go back to the tough ones. Press B to give birth. This is a dumb one, I will say.
What the hell? I'm going to say it's Death Stranding because there's the babies in the test tubes.
Oh, you probably do that, if not weirder, in Death Stranding. This example comes from Ancestors, the Humankind Odyssey, the
of course,
monkey game.
A well-known game that I played.
A well-known monkey game.
Yeah. Jesus.
Okay, the penultimate question, and I'll give you a little clue by saying this is a one very dear to my heart.
Bloodborne.
You're close. I almost will give it to you, but no. Press X to curl up like a ball.
Oh, that's Dark Souls.
That is indeed Dark Souls.
That's when you curl up in the bird's nest and he flies you away to the.
Absolutely, just like a little ball or an egg.
See, guys, I do know my stuff every once in a while.
All right, well, let's see if you can get the toughest, most skill testing one I've put on here as a final bonus point. Press X to Jason.
Heavy rain.
Heavy rain,
oh
indeed.
My God. You know what? That That made me feel really good. Thank you very much for putting that question at the end.
Oh, I will say, like, that is the one that inspired the whole quiz.
For anyone that's not seen the Heavy Rain Jason glitch, you have to pause the podcast right now before we do listener mail and go watch the just search like Heavy Rain Jason glitch. You'll see it on YouTube. It's the funniest thing in the world. We'll leave it at that. Kate, I would say thank you for designing a quiz, but I feel I feel a little bit called out on this one. So I think next time, whatever I end up quizzing or doing whatever, it's gonna be a bit of a tough one for you back. So we'll see what I come up with.
Yeah, give me some retribution. I'll be training.
Yeah. Anyways, but since we talked about Jason, we pressed X to say Jason. We're gonna do listener mail, and today we have a question from none other than Jazz, a returning writer. Thank you again for another question, Jazz. And he would like to know today, what is a sequel or spin-off that we would like or can't wait for, and what would we hope from it? He said, would you like to build more lore, new mechanics, complete remake from the ground up, etc.? Some of his examples that he can't wait for are a new game from Nier, Bloodborne 2, Persona 6, or Tales of Arise, even though he says, this one doesn't really pique my interest, but he's too much of a Tales fanboy to not want it. So he just got outed as a Tales fanboy.
Yep.
But, Kate, what are you looking for a sequel?
Well, I will preface this by saying I tried to come up with games that weren't obviously going to have a sequel or like something announced. Like, for example, like God of War, the next God of War, like Ragnarok, I'm super hyped for. But
I did the same thing.
We all knew that was coming.
My rule was like, if we know it's coming out, if it's been announced, I'm not picking it.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously not going to pick another Dark Souls game, because obviously they're making like they're going to make one, right? So
yeah, exactly. I had to, just for my own sake, make a little honorable mention for Bloodborne 2, because, that's something that comes up in rumors a lot, if there's ever going to be a Bloodborne 2. And I actually think that it was kind of an intimate story, and it tied up really nicely in a sort of complete package. And I don't think there's really a lot of places for a sequel to go with Bloodborne. Yeah. I think, if anything, they could do a prequel. There's a lot of characters mentioned from old hunters in the beginning of the hunt that would be interesting to explore.
Yeah, that would.
But I think there's not really much I would want to add or tweak in terms of mechanics or things that a sequel would maybe want to change. I would love a Bloodborne 2 just to have more Bloodborne to play. I can't,
almost like an expansion.
Yeah, exactly. I can't stress enough that if another Bloodborne game got, announced, I would explode in joy, and I'd maybe end up in the hospital. I would be so excited.
Like me when the Dallas Stars lost.
But the good version.
Yeah.
But that's not my pick, because I don't think a Bloodborne 2 is what we need, or would be the correct kind of answer for a question like this. So I actually picked a Final Fantasy Advanced Tactics game.
Oh, hell yes. Hell yes.
So that was one of the Game Boy games that we owned as kids.
Well, Final Fantasy Tactics was on PS1 originally, and we had Tactics Advance, which was the better version, in my opinion.
Absolutely, the Game Boy game, and it was one of those games that we just would constantly be creating new games and running through over and over again. And it did get a sequel in 2008 on the DS.
That game was not as good.
Yeah, it was still fine, but it just didn't really feel like it reimagined the series much, or really made a lot of interesting improvements. So it's been a while even since that came out, and I think it is kind of a unique version of a team-based tactics game that we just don't really see tons of these days.
Yeah, there's not a lot of them.
So I think it could be really cool. It could come out with some new class types and monsters and scenario goals. And the other thing I think would be really neat and would kind of fit into today's market well is you build your clan of characters as you go. So you have a big team of units that you bring with you to each mission. And in the original games, there are a couple story-specific characters, but for the vast majority, your team is comprised of just randomly generated characters. So I think now it could be kind of neat where you could maybe have a bit more of a story focus, and you could meet NPCs who could either join your team based on, maybe making dialogue decisions or having some kind of morality system. And I think they could almost give it a social sim kind of aspect where you're managing your team outside of combat as well.
That sounds fantastic.
So I would love to see that game kind of overhauled and come back as a strong tactics game, but also with another element of character depth to it. Right.
That's a badass answer. I like that.
Yeah, I want Final Fantasy Advanced Tactics Switch.
All right. Well, for mine, I feel like I got a pretty good answer as well, actually. But I mean, I'm always down for, just as a couple quick mentions, like whatever Yacht Club does next with Shovel Knight or like their next sequel. Like I'm so in for that. I just
absolutely
love that
They've given us so many free Shovel Knight add-ons. It's time for maybe a new game that maybe we can pay for.
Yeah. Well, I will pay for it day one. I'll tell you that. And same thing with like the Steam World series from Image and Form. Like I just really love everything they put out, and I'll definitely buy like whatever their next sequel is in that universe as well. But my answer for the sequel I would like is a new Mod Nation Racers game.
Oh, clever.
And so I was kind of thinking about this just because Mario Kart is like, I love Mario Kart. It's so great. And there's CTR and like Crash Team Racing and a few other ones, but they're just nothing compared to Mario Kart. And I actually really loved Mod Nation Racers back on the PS3, which was like a very similar, kart combat racing kind of game. But the idea was that you could make your own characters in your own carts, and you could go in. There was like quite in-depth customization. You could design your own tracks, and you could really make like I made Luigi at one point. I made Phoenix Wright, and I made like a car for him. It was really cool, but the game had a lot of flaws because it just took forever to load. And if you were playing online, it would have to like load everyone's custom content in and a custom track, and you'd sit there for like it felt like hours loading this game.
And sometimes those games work really well as like party games, and if it's not really accessible, then it can maybe struggle a little bit.
Yeah, it was very in-depth, and it was a good idea, but it just didn't run super well. So I feel like with the new SSD and like the fast load times on the PS5, they could try to revive that, and it would just be way more seamless to put all the custom content in and have it load much faster and be way more playable. And I also thought, just to take it a step further, I would love to see additional stuff like planes and boats, like in a Diddy Kong Racing type of game.
Nice.
Not just cars, like you could have the variety of different vehicles as well.
And that's another good franchise you could have picked, because I don't think Diddy Kong Racing ever got like an actual sequel.
There was a DS one, I believe.
There?
But I mean, who cares? We're gonna get Mod Nation Racers 2 now.
Absolutely.
With everything, but I think that would be really cool. And you could also do like a PSVR version where you could be like actually in the car, and if you looked around at the other players, you could see like they would look like the creation that they'd made.
Right.
Like
you could have like its version of like the Donkey Kong face when he like slow-mos past you, and like the evil Luigi stare.
Yeah, that would be awesome. So that's my pick. But honestly, I think I'd rather play yours at this point. That sounds like a really badass game.
Well.
Oh well.
Yours sounds good too. But if you have a game you'd love to see a sequel to, you can let us know, and we'll all, sadly dream about it together, and it'll never come out.
You never know. Yeah, well, like I said, our email address and our Twitter and everything will be in the description of the show, at CNDSPod on Twitter, of course, and Instagram. Tell your friends about the show, guys. Let them know that we're pumping out some good ass content over here, and get them to listen. But that's going to be us for today. Thank you very much for joining us. And we will see you, actually, as a special announcement, we are planning to do a God of War spoiler cast pretty soon. I don't know if that'll be out before our next episode or not, but be on the lookout for that at some point. And of course, our regular episode will come out again in 2 weeks' time, and we will see you then. The intro and outro music for Circles and Squares was produced by friend of the show, Matthew Chan. Interlude music is from Scott Gratton of the Free Music Archive. Our channel art was created by @unreasonable on Twitter, and our brother Alex is the designer of the Circles and Squares logo. Thank you all for listening and supporting the show.